Doing good.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'd like to call the Door County Board of Supervisors meeting to order on Tuesday, August 28th at approximately 9 a.m. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Oh,
Are we going to restart our computer?
Oh, wow.
A rookie.
this man will call Jeremy.
We could do it manually.
I just came back. It's like I'm sitting in Florida again.
Well, can we do a roll call? Yep.
I was going to say,
We'll read them out.
just call names.
Call by name. Do the.
We'll be doing a roll call.
Dan Ossett.
Here.
Helen Bacon.
Here.
Bob Boatman.
Here.
Vinnie Chomo.
Here.
David Engelbert.
Here.
Roy Engelbert.
Here.
David Inigo.
Here.
Ken Fisher.
Here.
Joel Gummickson.
Excused.
Randy Halstead.
Here.
John Cook.
Excused.
Susan Kohout.
Here.
David Lino.
Here.
Megan Lundell.
Here.
John Ninus.
Here.
Nissa Norton.
Here.
Nancy Robillard.
Here.
Kathy Schultz.
Here.
Richard Burley.
Here.
Laura Blease Wadchek.
Here.
Linda Wade.
Excused. So we have 18 present, 3 excused. Presentation of the agenda.
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Correspondence. In your packet was the unassigned fund balance. Does anybody else have any correspondence they would like to add?
Actually,
We are going to take I'm sorry, what?
I would like to add something.
Sure.
I did send it to some of you, so you saw it, but I got a lovely note yesterday from a lady in the district whose family has been going to the fair for 27 years. She's seasonal, so she doesn't live here all year, but they always go, and she loves it, and she went this year, and she and her family and grandchildren and children were all delighted. So it was well done.
Okay. Thank you. We are going to take public comment in 2 different manners this morning. First of all, we're going to change the agenda and we're going to go to the approval of the minutes. After approval of the minutes, we're going to go down to the special reports and the new business presentation of the county Fairest. After that, we will back up to our standard public comment on an item other than having to do with the discussion of reclassification of jailers. When we get to, and we'll go through the rest of the agenda, we will do the public comment on the reclassification at the time that we're going to do the discussion and presentation on the reclassification. So it's all together in one piece. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, approval of the minutes of July 24, 2018 regular meeting.
Move for approval. Second.
Changes, additions, comments, deletions? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Now we're going to move down to, public comment. Yeah, we're going to go to public comment. Does anybody have a public comment on an item other than the reclassification? Okay. We're going to move down to new business. Presentation of County Fairest. As I figured.
Good morning.
Morning.
Morning, everyone. So a little housekeeping first. I'd like to say that as of right now, there's actually more than one queen in this room. Sorry, Jill.
At
Where's your
least you
crown?
recognized
Where's your
her.
crown? It's there.
Okay, we'll get a photo later. Okay, so good morning, everyone. So this morning, I wanted to add this to the, well, a couple weeks ago, we added this, want to put on the agenda to talk about Door County Fair, so the fair. So when I was so delighted and welcome to be part of Door County Supervisors as appointed and then re-elected, I wanted to keep my commitment of promoting and supporting our Door County Fair. And with that, I started up a Fairest of the Fair program. What does that mean? That means that there's a person that goes through a selection process, and that person promotes and supports agriculture and the fair as a whole. So with that, I wanted to bring those two, a junior fairest and a fairest of the fair, to the county board to say thank you for the gratitude for supporting the fair. The two people I brought you today, we joked around about this summer, is that I literally adopted 2 more daughters. At first I said my stepchildren, I said, no, that sounds a little forced. We can't say step. It sounds like they don't have a choice in the matter. No, but they become my adopted daughters, and they're wonderful young women. Part of starting up this program consists of tallying up the work that became involved with doing this. It was 250 hours of my free time, like I don't have enough of it, and $2,000 of my own money. With that, we also receive sponsorships from various businesses, and we're always taking on more sponsors. So the Door County Fair is one of the largest sponsors. They sponsor the scholarship and part of the startup cost. The need to promote our fair is large. It's not just for tourists and people coming to visit, but it's for our youth and our young to learn leadership skills and social. By starting up this program, we save marketing dollars, and also it promotes youth leadership. I always thought of our county fair, or anybody's county fair, as the heart of the county. And I ask you to reflect on that, your county fair as the heart of your county. If you don't agree with that, then I would have to ask you, how is it not? So please think of that and reflect that. So as somebody that has been, if you agree that I'm somewhat of a good leader, a product of a Fairest of the Fair program, without further ado, I'd like to introduce 2 more people that are a product of a Fairest of the Fair program. Ms. Helen Parks as our Junior Fairest of the Fair, and Ms. Clare Olsen as our Fairest of the Fair for Door County.
Good morning. My name is Helen Parks, and I am this year's Junior Fairest of the Fair. I am a senior from Southern Door High School. I'm really involved in my school. I'm the president of FFA. I'm in a lot of more organizations, and I could probably go on for a long time about how much I'm in it. So I love being involved in my community, and agriculture is a big part of my life. I own 3 horses with another pony in our barn, so I'm really passionate about horses. I plan to attend college to study equine science and agribusiness, and then I also plan to return here to work in our community again with our youth. So I'm really passionate about the fair as well. It's always been a part of my life, so I was really excited to be a part of this program this year and help connect our community with the fair. Being involved in our fair was really fun for me. I think the best part of being the Fairest of the Fair for the fair this year was just being able to have opportunities to see more of the fair and be involved in more events and shows. And it was just a lot of fun to be able to go to the different barns and connect with all of the youth and see what they're doing, or get to talk to people at different events and just see what their opinions are. So I really enjoyed being the Junior Fairest of the Fair this year and being able to be involved more in our fair. I'd now like to introduce our Fairest of the Fair, Clare Olsen.
Hi Hi, everyone. I just wanted to thank you for having us here today. It's a real honor to be here. Like Helen said, my name is Clare Olsen. I'm currently a sophomore attending UW River Falls, studying agricultural education with a minor in dairy science. I'm a sixth generation on my family farm, and our farm is actually 1 year younger than the Door County Fair, so 146 years instead of 147 years. So it's a pretty cool. Growing up on a dairy farm has given me so many benefits and opportunities, and one of those being able to show dairy cattle at the Door County Fair. It's something that I've been doing since yay tall. So through my 4-H club, I was also able to go to many events, and I was actually on a state team for 4-H, which only like the top 10% of 4-H members get to be on. So that was a pretty cool experience, and I was able to gain leadership skills and public skills. And these skills made me who I am today partially. So the Door County Fair has always, like I said before, always something I've been to, and I saw it as like the last kind of fun event before school starts again. So let's see, where am I? What I learned through the Fairest of the Fair program, when I learned about the Fairest of the Fair program starting last fall, I knew it was my way to give back to something, aka the Door County Fair, that had given me so much as a child. So, and kind of like they mentioned before, the Fairest of the Fair program is a youth leadership scholarship program to promote and engage others to be part of the Door County Fair through variety of opportunities such as educational, social, cultural, and commercial over a 1-year term. So I have the term for 1 year. Like we were talking about, my main event was the Door County Fair, which is August 1st to the 5th, so I hope I saw you there. And I had a lot of opportunities to be active throughout the fair. I did many things, such as handing out buyer's ribbons at the QMass sale. I announced Vic Ferrari, and I even got to participate in a pie eating contest. So unfortunately, I did not win, but hopefully I started a new tradition, which is something I'm really into, because tradition is kind of a lot. It's everything. So that was fun. And then besides the fair, I got involved in a lot of events throughout the county, such as parades, festivals, radio interviews, magazine interviews, and just to promote what our county is all about. So, and we also had, I got to listen to people's feedback about the fair, and hopefully start some new ideas, such as the plein air event, which is where we invite county artists to come and paint at the Door County Fair. So something we're hoping to get started. So, and then my most recent event as the Door County, Door County Fairest of the Fair, is I went down to, so the day after our county fair, I went down to state fair. So, you think you get a little break, but nope, keep going. So, and I got to go for the state Fairest of the Fair reunion. So all of the Fairest of the Fair from each county, if they have a program, go down and you meet everyone. And it was actually a really cool event for me, because from people that I had known through 4-H and FFA, I got to just see them again, and I hadn't seen them in a couple years. So it was just a really cool event that I got to reconnect with people and meet various other people from other counties. So that was really cool for me. And my next big event will be in January. I will be competing for the state Fairest of the Fair contest. So that's in January down in the Dell. So hopefully I'll get a little vacation then, but it's going to be a lot of work. So, but yeah. So, and I got to meet a lot of cool people through being the Fairest of the Fair. So, and being the very first Fairest of the Fair is a truly humbling honor. So my dad told me when I first found out that I was going to be the Fairest of the Fair that, Claire, someday you're going to be a trivia question. I'm like, thanks, Dad. Thanks. But I just want to thank you guys for your support to our county fair, and feel free to contact us with any other questions, or if you have interest and to be a part of the program. And we're always looking for sponsors, like Laura said, and even something simple as like gas cards or printing, or food. Food is always good. So, and if you have any other questions, you can message us or contact Laura. So thank you again for having us.
Thank you.
Dave,
Can we have the next special
Yep,
report?
that's what we're doing.
Yes, if we're doing that. Right. Next, we're going to do the special report, Partnership for Children and Families with Candice Tart and Rebecca Nicholson.
Hi, if I could just give a little introduction without standing. I have felt very honored to be asked to be on their executive committee, and this is a wonderful example of a public-private participation coming together to solve problems that were identified by more than one agency in the county, and I would like to especially thank the Extension, Public Health, Human Services, Law Enforcement, as well as the City Police Department, Boys and Girls Club, United Way especially for really allowing us to have a office in their building and helping us with fundraising and all other types of things in the school systems in the county. I know that some of you have heard them before, but when I was at the annual meeting and I heard everything that they had accomplished in the last year, I think it's very important that we know what is possible. To me, this is one of the best organizations I've ever belonged to. The other thing is we have younger people here. There's a lot of people that are grandparents, but we also have a lot of younger members that are parents, and I thought that they might be able to take this information and bring it back to their friends and their constituents as well as all of us. So, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Helen. My name is Candice Tart. I'm the coordinator for the Door County Partnership for Children and Families. And with me, I have Rebecca Nicholson, who is our community connector. She'll tell you more about her role here in a minute. Okay, so the Door County Partnership for Children and Families, this is our mission. So together with our partner organizations, we are dedicated to connecting people to resources through a family-centered approach in order to achieve social, emotional well-being and school success. So put more simply, we're dedicated to working together and supporting the families and the children here in Door County. So like Helen said, I know that some of you have heard our presentation before, so we're not going to give a lot of the details necessarily, but I do want to give a little bit of an overview for those of you who aren't familiar with our program. So the Partnership for Children and Families was started in 2015 after a community conversation that Helen talked about, where many individuals from multiple organizations came to the table and talked about the issue that our children were coming to school and were not prepared to be there. Since that time, we've kind of grown into realizing there's more to successful children than just being prepared for school. That's a huge part of it, and that will outline their future success. But we also know that we need to help our families be successful, and that could mean a broad range of things. Families have a lot of different needs and a lot of different things that they are looking for and a lot of resources that they need. This slide here just kind of gives a brief overview of what the Door County Partnership for Children and Families looks like. So we are chaired by two co-chairs, Ann Schmegel from Sunset Elementary School, she's the principal there, and Mary Ellen Smith, who is a retired public health nurse. From there, we have our executive committee, who there are many members from several different organizations. I'll put those up here in a minute. But then we also have several committees. All of those committees have people from different organizations and from the public, parents, just different backgrounds, different resources that they come with. So like I said, this is our executive committee. So a few of those members you might recognize. We have Beth Locken from the Door County Library, Corey McFarland and Dory Goddard from Human Services. We have Helen Bacon as one of our executive committee members, Tenley Kaler from UW Extension, and several others from other organizations who are involved. So just to give you a little bit of what we've accomplished in the last 2-3 years that we've been going. One of our committees is our collaboration committee. This committee is responsible for planning opportunities for provider education, but also opportunities for public education as well. So some of the things that they've done, recently we did a 7 essential ingredients of trauma-informed care training that Tenley Kaler from UW Extension taught, and we partnered with her on that. We are also currently in the process of working with the Mental Health Focus Group to plan a series of film and panel discussions coming up this fall. So watch for information about that. And we were also involved with the recent second annual Safe Kids Door County event that was held at the fairgrounds. And that event was very successful. We had about 140 children who attended this year, which was about 40 more than we had last year. So we're going to call it a very big success. Another committee that we have is our Community Resource Committee. So this is chaired by Beth Locken at the library. And what this committee is responsible for is maintaining an online community resource guide. That is hosted on the library's website. It is a place that anyone could go for information if you're looking for something in particular here in Door County. We have our Family Enrichment Committee, which is chaired by Tenley Kaler from UW Extension. So this committee is responsible for planning and promoting different types of parent and family education and engagement activities. So one thing hopefully you've heard about, if you haven't, there are some brochures around, is our Raising a Thinking Child class. So Tenley Kaler actually teaches that class for us, so we've partnered with UW Extension. And with a grant that we received through Public Health Department, we have been able to sponsor so far 5 classes. It is an 8-week class that parents or caregivers take. It is completely free and also provide free childcare and free meals for the family to try to take away any barriers from attending. To date, like I said, we had 5 classes, so that's about 40 parents or caregivers that have attended, and 100% of them so far would say that they would recommend that class to another person, that they would definitely say somebody else should take it. They've said things like the bond between them and their children has really increased, or they know better how to communicate with their children. They're less frustrated, there's less fights at bedtime, just different ways. There's even a few of them who've said that the things that they learned in this class were really beneficial in working with their coworkers or their spouse. It changes the way that we think, the way that we talk to other people, so it can really make a big impact on how we talk to our children. So the next thing we're going to talk about, I'm actually going to hand it over to Rebecca and let her talk about our Community Connections program.
Thank you, Candice. My name is Rebecca Nicholson. I am a parent in Door County. I have 3 boys. 2 of them are now adults and doing well out in the real world. One is a 17-year-old. He'll be a senior at Southern Door this year, and he is on the spectrum. He has Asperger's syndrome. And I have my daughter, who came quite a bit later. She's now 10 years old, and she is my spirited child. She has taught me a lot over the last 10 years, and she has given me a lot of grief. I want to just give you a little background on how I even got involved with Community Connections. Back when Ashlyn was in kindergarten, she's in 5th grade now, I was having a lot of severe emotional behavioral issues with Ashlyn, more so than I had gotten from the boys as they were younger. I was very overwhelmed. I was just going through a divorce. My ex-husband is who she knew as Dad, and he did not follow through on staying connected with her, so we were going through some abandonment issues there. After being stressed out over raising the 3 boys and having her, I just kind of hit a brick wall. Really was feeling like I couldn't do it anymore, so I contacted a family member and said, "Can you help? Can you take her?" I kind of admitted to my defeat and didn't know where to go. So that family member said that they would talk it over with their spouse and let me know, and I didn't hear back from them. I heard back from Child Protective Services, which at first scared me a lot, and I was hurt that that family member didn't contact me back, but rather contacted the county. I had contact with CPS in Brown County when the boys were younger, and that experience wasn't so great. So I was like, oh great, here we go again. So the Child Protective Services worker that was assigned to my case came out to the house, and she was nothing but absolutely wonderful. She wanted to support me. She didn't, she clearly stated that she wasn't there to judge me. So I knew that at that point that things have changed over the years and that the county does offer support for families. Through that service, I was then referred to the CCS program through Door County, which is the Comprehensive Community Services Program. So I was assigned a team called a Coordinated Services Team for Ashlyn, which included members of school, Boys and Girls Club, doctors, her psychiatrist. Everybody was on this team, including myself and my case manager. So we've been in the program now for going on almost 4 years, and Ashlyn has made extreme amount of progress. So back up to when she's in kindergarten, I was like, once I started seeing some results from this, and I was like, well, geez, I didn't know where to go for this. So what about the rest of the parents in Door County that are struggling? And I happened to be working for a website design firm at the time. And so I knew that a lot of our young parents are out on social media and online, and that's kind of the way to go and to communicate with them. So I asked my boss at the time if I built this website called doorcountyparents.com, how much would he charge me to do the hosting? Because some of you may or may not know that you need to pay for your online files to sit on a server somewhere. And he said, you know what? He said, it's for a really great cause, and as long as you stay working for me, I will host it for you for free. So I was like, okay, great. Being in the CCS program, I was asked to be a parent rep for a couple of conversations with the county. And so they heard about my website. One thing led to another. I ended up volunteering with the partnership early on and helping them with their marketing. And then was actually applied for and offered the position of community connector in July of last year. So as much as my daughter has put me through heck, she got me a new career. She's taught me all kinds of things. So that's been wonderful. And as a side note, Better Communications is who I was working for, and they still host the website for free. We did acknowledge them at our annual event to give them thanks and gratitude for that. So moving forward, I know I'm limited on time. So with Community Connections, what I do is I connect parents in Door County that either are reluctant to receive services because they had the same thoughts as I did early on, that, oh gosh, I'm going to be judged, this is going to be horrible, or they just don't know where to get those services. I am not a case manager. I do not duplicate the services that we have out in the community. I just help that parent get to that help. So I have, since November of last year when we went live with my service, I have helped just under 25 families connect with different resources in the county. So Family Services of Northeast Wisconsin, Cradle to Career, the Door County Human Services Department. I had 2 parents that successfully transferred or transitioned into the CCS program. I have also sent them on to the dental clinic. I've referred them to Raising a Thinking Child class, which I also took and have reaped the benefits of. I also, this one's a little bit of a different. I helped a homeless teen graduate, make sure he had somewhere to stay so he could graduate high school and go on to post-secondary education. That is an underserved group of individuals in our county, and I'm hoping that through conversations that we can make a difference there. But I was able to procure him funding through Salvation Army, a local church, and we had a very generous private donor step forward and pay for him to have to stay in a motel so that he could finish school. He went off to New Hampshire in the summer, worked a summer job. Now he's back in our community and will be attending NWTC this fall. So that was great. So who is eligible for Community Connections? So any Door County resident who is pregnant or raising a child is eligible. We have a pretty simple referral system on the doorcountyparents.com website. We have a place where parents can go and self-refer, friends can refer, providers can refer. Basically, I get the information, then I contact that family and see what they need for assistance. I meet up with them. I collect all of the resource information and point them in the right direction. Yep, just 1 second. So if, Jill, if you could put on our website for us.
Oh, hey.
So this is the Door County Parents website that I had built early on. I've done a lot over the last year and a half with it. So the slides that you see are, you know, events that we have going on or tips and tricks for families. There's an events calendar attached to this. So we try to stick with any free family events being on that calendar mostly. We did put a lot of the library's summer events on there. Under the parent, Jill, can you click on the parents menu? Yep, and then down to Community Connections. So if you scroll down just a little bit, this talks about what Community Connections is, and then as you get down to the bottom, you'll see my picture and my information, and then there's a button that says connect with a, or what does it say there? Can't read it. So in other words, you click the button and that's the form that comes up for the referral process. And then you would say, I'm filling this out for myself or someone else. You fill out the information, submit it, and I get an email saying we have a submission out there. I go get the information and I connect with the family. So on the website as well, and you don't have to click through anything else, Jill, but I'd encourage you to take a look at it. There's a community resources link that goes right to the library page that Candice was referring to, where all of our resources in Door County are listed there, doctors, churches, education options, anything you can think of is out there. If there's anything out there that you're looking and you don't see it but should be, you can let Candice know, or Beth Locken at the library. The providers piece of the website is for our partners and our providers, and we keep different types of training materials out there, like if they wanted to attend a training but missed it, I put the materials out there for them. It is password protected, but only because we don't want to confuse parents if they were to click on that and go out there and not understand what some of the stuff was. So when you click on the providers, it comes to a screen and you can request access, and I'll send you the password for it, and you can get in there and look around and see what we have. I think that's about it. Thank you.
Can you go back to the presentation, please? So I don't want to take too much more time. Just really quick, want to give you an idea of where we're headed in the future. So I'll skip forward a little here. Okay, so heading forward, currently Rebecca and I are the 2 staff members for the Partnership for Children and Families. We have a lot of great volunteers, but we are actually in the process of looking to hire our 3rd staff member, which I think is a great indicator of how much our program is growing and what we need. So that person is going to be called our Family Engagement Leader. Their responsibilities will be to do a lot more of the family and the parent and caregiver opportunities that we have. So helping with the Raising a Thinking Child class, providing parent cafes moving forward, just different opportunities that we can have. One thing I also didn't talk about was block parties, which is an opportunity for adults and children to come and just play with blocks. That time for play, that time to be together. So that's another thing that person will be responsible for. Having that 3rd person will allow us to do more of those things. Right now, both Rebecca and I, and then Tenley, we all have children. We all have other responsibilities in our jobs, but we want to be able to provide things for our families. So that will be an important position. We'll continue to do the things that we're already doing, just continuing to grow. So this is a quick list of some of our partner organizations. There's a lot of groups up there. Not all of the groups that we work with are up here as well, but you'll see there are a lot of different groups here in the Government Center that we work closely with. And then just to give you a quick idea of where our funding comes from, United Way is our fiscal agent. We are located in the United Way office, and we do receive some funding from there, but we also receive funding from a lot of different locations. One of them was a grant through the Public Health Department, the Door County Medical Center, the Women's Fund, the Community Foundation, and then private donors as well. And I think that's it. So, I mean, are there any questions at all that anyone has quickly?
I do. How many contacts, I know you said you've connected 25 families with county services. How many contacts or referrals do you think you've had in your time so far?
Sure. So I have 100% referral. So in other words, I've had referrals for 25 families or just under 25 families, and that's how many I served and connected to a resource.
Nice. Thanks. And just also a comment, Rebecca and I don't know each other well, but we do know some of the people in the community, some of the same people in the community that she has connected. And I can say that those folks would not have been reaching out to the county without her support and without her paving that way for them. And I'm really grateful.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just kind of a follow-up to that too. I think that Rebecca's services are very important, and there are a lot of people who are in need. But I also want to make sure that everyone is aware that as the Partnership for Children and Families, we want to be a resource for all families, all children and parents and caregivers, anyone who works with or interacts with children. If you have a question when it comes to raising children in Door County, we want to be that place that you can go so that you know you have one place to call and not try to find all of the answers yourself. Is there anything else?
No.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, before we proceed to resolutions, we now have the ability to sign in.
Hey,
Or not.
Or not.
not now. I was gonna say,
Good try.
Sorry, Jelly, I haven't heard anything.
Labor Day's coming.
thank goodness. Oh, now we're gonna try this again. Yay,
Need a stick? There you go.
look at that.
There we go.
18 present, 3 excused. Thank you. Okay,
We knew that.
moving to resolutions, 2018-49 non-commercial hangar site lease agreement. Ben Stevenson, number 31. Mr. Ninus.
Yes, I move for approval of Resolution 2018-49. Second. This is the standard lease agreement approved by the committee. Our rules say anything over 3 years need to come before the board. So if anybody has any questions, I'll try and answer them. Otherwise, the particulars of the contract is in your packet.
Any questions? If not, we will go to the voter board.
Or maybe not.
He's very impatient.
What can I say?
That has passed 18 yes, 3 excused. Thank you. Next, Resolution 2018-50, proclamation for library card sign-up month for September. Megan?
Yes, thank you so much. When Tina, the director of our library system, asked me if I would be interested in presenting this, I replied with a resounding yes. I believe a library card opens up a whole new world of knowledge for every member of our community, whether we're looking for a job, starting a small business, trying a new hobby, or pursuing a degree. And I'll also note that you can sign up for a library card at any branch of the Door County Library or go to doorcountylibrary.org. So the proclamation, library card sign up month, September. To the Door County Board of Supervisors. Whereas a library card is the most important school supply of all, and whereas libraries play an important role in the education and development of children, and whereas libraries serve students of all ages, from early literacy through adult lifelong learning, and whereas libraries empower all people to pursue their interests, discover their passions, and achieve their highest potential as learners and citizens, and whereas libraries bring communities together, creating welcoming and inclusive spaces for students of all backgrounds to learn together. And whereas libraries are constantly transforming and expanding their services to meet the needs of the community that they serve. Whereas libraries promote equity, making digital technology and information equally accessible to all. Now therefore, be it resolved that the Door County Board of Supervisors does hereby proclaim September Library Card Sign-Up Month in Door County, Wisconsin, and encourages everyone to sign up for their own library card today. Thank you.
Would you like to make the motion to approve?
Yes, so moved.
Second.
Second. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. 2018-51, committee appointment to CCS CST Coordinating Committee. I'll make the initial motion.
I'll second it.
Ken?
Sure. This is just a appointment, obviously, as it states in the resolution, for the coordinating committee, and the individual that's being appointed is Jamie Cole, and along with her is included is her biography for the appointment, if you have any questions.
Question? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution 2018-52, grant of easement to Sturgeon Bay Utilities, John Miles County Park. Mr. Ofsted.
Yes, I'd like to make the motion to grant this easement.
I'll second it.
This is an easement at the fairgrounds. It's the underground easement for electricity. It has something to do with antenna. And if you need any further information, ask Ken.
Sure, so on your packet, page 19 of 61, it shows you where the easement is being located. Again, it's actually a dual purpose. One is obviously, as Dan had mentioned, is for the tower that's being located there that we're doing a joint project at. That'll house our communications equipment. And then we're also putting conduit along with that utility easement for future use at John Miles Fairgrounds. So.
This is along the driveway.
And actually, if you're wondering your location, if you look at the map, you'll see the northern property line is that dark line, and you'll see those two buildings. Those are actually the two salt sheds. So it's actually north of the driveway. It's a very northern portion of the property line, and it's a 12-foot easement, if you can see in the map.
So we will go to the voter board in this one if there's no questions. That has passed on the vote of 18 yes, 3 excused. Resolution 2018-53, transfer of non-budgeted funds, facilities and parks department to replace the boiler at Justice Center. Kathy?
I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution number 2018-53.
Second.
As it states in the body, I don't know, is Wayne here? Okay. As it states in the body of the resolution, boiler number 2 at the Justice Center, which supplies hot water to the facility, suffered a catastrophic failure of its electronic control board and is deemed unrepairable. The cost is not expected to exceed $40,000. So the Finance Committee is moving that the $40,000 be transferred from the Building Equipment Replacement Reserve account to Facilities and Parks Repairs and Maintenance, Justice Center. And in the fiscal impact, it says there's $600,000 in this account, in the reserve account, and that if this is approved, it'll lower to $560,000.
Any questions? Now we'll go to the voter board. That has passed on a vote of 18 yes, 3 excused. Resolution 2018-54, transfer of non-budgeted funds, Human Services LTD for ADRC Transportation Program. Kathy?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 2018-54.
I'll second.
This one I'm going to let Ken explain, please.
Sure, I know Joe is here as well.
Oh, Joe's
so-
here, okay.
Yeah, and Joe and I could take team if necessary, but I'll do the short version and then see if you have questions. But in essence, obviously, we did a little bit of a presentation on our transportation program. One thing that we have learned in our program, and it can get really complicated with our federal funding and so forth, but long story short is that we're actually going to be running a deficit this year. And it's projected to be approximately, I think, $32,000 for this year. And then obviously that debt is expected to also carry over into next year as well. So one of the things that we are, I guess, concerned about is obviously that increasing in the future. Obviously the county, while it's a very valuable program, we don't have the capacity to really bring on a countywide tax levy funded transportation system. So in essence, what we're requesting is really the ability to bring someone on, whether it be what we consider an LTE or under a contract, someone that could really, I guess, dive into the transportation program and actually figure out how we should move forward, I guess, long-term with the program. So in essence, we're trying to figure out, and I guess the reason why we're doing it now is twofold. Really, the timing is significant because if we do make any changes, the way the federal grants work, we need to have the new RFP prepared and out by March. So that way we can get the bids in and make the changes. So we really need to get someone on as soon as possible to actually look at the program and then if they're going to make any changes, to actually try to see if we can make modifications to that RFP. The intent of this person or individual that would do this would obviously be working with, I guess, all the communities and trying to get input in the program and to see what options are available. But, I mean, we told the other committees, and I'll just be honest here as well, I guess our goal is to see if we can find a solution that either, one, shows how we can sustain the program moving forward, or really, to be honest, how to back out of the program because we can't afford to move forward with a negative trend with the program. So what we're asking for was actually $32,400, but 50% of it's actually covered through the transportation program. So that'll be for this portion of the year. And then what you'll see is as the budget comes forward for next year, we're actually including that position in the budget for next year. And again, it's just for 1 year for next year, but that'll be part of the budget. But I just want to be transparent that we're doing $16,000 this year. And then we actually budgeted for it next year, but again, the grants, federal grants offset it, which is kind of weird. We spend more, then we get more grants. But again, it's very complicated. So in essence, why we're here today is to see if we can figure out a way to, again, either figure out a way to operate the program where it sustains itself, or again, to try to figure out a way to, in essence, transition out of the program. Are there any questions I can ask, or if not, Joe's in the back as well, that we can explain that as well?
If not, we'll go to the voter board. That is passed on a vote of 18 yes, 3 refused. Resolution 2018-55, approval of the agreement to amend the county administrator contract. I'll make the initial motion to approve.
I hear crickets out there.
No, thank you, Ken. As stated in the package of information, you have a copy of the existing contract. The proposed amendment to the contract starts on page 30. Kelly is here to explain anything. Grant would be here to explain anything, but we did have the evaluation of Ken. We met with the administrative committee and went through the evaluation. Have gone through the negotiation with this changes to the agreement, and the administrative committee has approved that last week, and this is why we are here presenting it to you today. If there's any questions, we're happy to answer. Dave?
I may have missed it, but I'm looking for the year, the current year, which is through August 3rd, what their salary is. I didn't see it here.
I don't have the exact figure, but it's about,
Roughly.
I think it's 117. Kelly might have it, but
Well, the list of the prior, or the continuous are in page 30.
Right.
right.
I was looking for a
You can do that
comparable
for-
of
he was looking for prior year.
increase through the years. That's what I was looking for.
Was that answered? Do you want Kelly to?
The 117 gives me a concept. That's close enough. It's your salary. You should know, have a concept of what you're getting paid.
Go to the bank.
I could do the math on the ones that were there. I just couldn't do the math with the one that exists today.
Right.
Any other questions or discussion? If not, we'll go to the voter board.
Undecided.
Has passed on a vote of 18 yes, 3 absent.
It was close.
You weren't sweating. Come on now. My question may have
Yeah,
been
are you sure that thing's working?
Yeah. Stop. You're killing me.
Ordinances, we'll report comprehensive zoning ordinance text amendment. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion, we accept the report for the text amendment to the Door County Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance.
Second.
As it states there on line 5 and 6, the Resource Planning Committee petitions to amend the Door County Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance with regard to the rental of secondary dwelling units and to prohibit sleeping places within other accessory structures. If you want any more detail than that, Sue Van Langenberg is here and she can do the explaining.
Come on up, Sue.
Hi there. So just to give you a little bit of background, we have two uses in our ordinance, a secondary dwelling unit, and that was put into our ordinance to allow for homeowners to have a little bit of flexibility, to allow for, in some cases, caretakers to live on their property, or a mother-in-law suite, or some overflow for their homes. So we added that to our ordinance, and then we also put in some controls so that these types of structures would not be used for commercial type uses. So they would stay for that residential purpose. In addition,
Use the microphone, please.
sorry about that.
Mr. Chairman.
In addition, we also, as the notice stated, or the ordinance had stated, that we have been, since 2016, allowing detached accessory structures, garages, sheds, to have living quarters, such as man caves, or rec rooms, or even overflow bunkhouses. And again, it was to allow some flexibility for those residential properties, not to create commercial uses in those residential neighborhoods. And again, we had some controls limiting the rental or sale of those secondary structures. With 2017 Wisconsin Act 59, which is the budget bill at the state level, they restricted local requirements, meaning short-term rentals were no longer going to be allowed to be controlled at our level or other municipalities. So our restrictions, the rental, the use of those structures, not being able to be rented for short terms, was no longer allowed. These structures now could be rented out as little as 7 days. So all our residential properties could now be more commercialized, bringing different feelings and uses to our residential neighborhoods. And that was not our intent at Door County. We wanted to provide the homeowners with some flexibility to allow for those caregivers to live on site or mother-in-laws to live on site. But now any of these structures could be rented as short as 7 days. So these changes are to bring our ordinance into compliance with the state rules. And then we're also trying to limit those accessory structures from turning into commercial uses. I know Ken can talk about this, but the RPC is probably going to have more discussions about these uses, because with the state law changes, it really has changed our intention and how we want to use these items. But for now, we need to bring our rules into compliance with these new state laws. I don't know if you have any other questions. I know it's a complicated set of allowances, but we're really trying to bring our ordinance into compliance and keep our residential areas residential.
Okay. Bob?
Question. So a commercial use, is renting that space to somebody that's not your caretaker, is that commercial use? Or
What I meant by more commercial use is we have some allowances for what we call a multiple occupancy development, where you can develop a parcel of land with multiple homes, 5, 10, oftentimes we call them condominiums. They all get rented out separately. And our intention with the secondary dwelling unit and the accessory structure was to allow a homeowner a little bit of flexibility for their mother-in-law or for their family members to come up on the weekend and stay with them. So we don't regulate the rental of just a single-family residence on a lot. We don't call that commercial. Whether you and your family live there or a different family lives there, we still call that a single-family use. So it won't affect any of that. We're just, because we had allowed for the second set of living quarters on a lot, or even the accessory structure to also be utilized for sleeping quarters for that family, with the state law changes, it now allowed for 3 different families potentially to be renting one lot. and it then would become more commercial. So we're really trying to bring the ordinance into compliance because we no longer can limit the secondary dwelling unit to 30 days. It can now be rented out for 7 days. Did that answer your question?
Yes, and follow up then. So in general, is the changes we're being asked to consider, will they reduce the numbers of places that people can rent? I guess I realize we have a pretty serious housing shortage in the county, not only for young families, but also for people who want to come up here and work.
Correct.
So is this going to be more restrictive and have more, it seems to me that if we're not allowing the sleeping places, then we're going to be losing even more housing.
So the sleeping places is just being removed from the accessory structure. So if you had a garage, we're just eliminating that, which obviously that was never intended to be an apartment that had a kitchen or potentially even a restroom. It could have just been bunkhouse. So we still have currently the secondary dwelling unit allowance, which is one of the other uses. It could be used for employee housing. So at this point in time, we still have the secondary dwelling allowance. The amendment would be that we have to meet the state requirement saying it can be rented out for the 7 days. It's not our intention. We'd rather have it rented out long-term for employee housing.
Right.
But to meet state laws, we had to change that. But that will be, I'm sure, a topic that our resource planning committee is going to be talking about more.
Thank you.
So would this, in essence, be limiting, when you say commercial use, just to get a full definition of this here, VRBO, Airbnb, things of that nature?
And this is where confusion comes in a lot because we have all of those terms and everybody knows that everybody's renting out properties via those websites. So like I said, in Door County, where we have comprehensive zoning, we have never regulated or prohibited the rental of a home.
Right, but a lot of those are above garages. I know of a few personally.
Right, so if we have allowed a secondary dwelling unit, for example, to give you a picture of what that might look like, is a detached garage with living space above, and a secondary dwelling unit does have to have a kitchen and a bathroom and a place for sleeping. So those can be rented out separately because of the state law now, and they can be rented at minimum 7 days. Could be rented longer. Our controls that we used to have were that the house and the secondary dwelling unit, the secondary dwelling unit had to be rented out for 30 days, which would help out with housing for employees, caretakers, etc. But now they can be rented out to anyone and for as little as 7 days. So we do have some secondary dwelling units.
So this would be prohibiting that?
It would prohibit what?
So this would be prohibiting that?
No, the state law now allows those to be rented out for as little as 7 days. We cannot take those permits back. What has been issued has been issued. We can only move forward.
So no further permits would be issued on that basis? So people would not be able to do that any longer if we went through with this?
At this point in time, the text amendments are just to bring it into compliance with the days, the 7 days. Right now, that use is still allowed, but I know there's concern with regard to this, and I know at our public hearing, the resource planning department or committee decided they wanted to talk in more detail to cover that concern, I believe. And I don't know if the members want to talk about that at all.
I found confusing was the difference between accessory building and secondary dwelling. So accessory building would be a sleeping area without a kitchen or running water or a bathroom, where a secondary dwelling has those. So they're permitted differently, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right. We're talking about 2 separate uses in addition to the home that's already on site. So yes, we still allow secondary dwelling units even if you vote on this today, but the committee, the resource planning committee, is going to talk, I believe, in more detail.
A couple of things. Right now, we don't have that many actually permitted uses anyways, correct?
secondary dwelling units.
Both that and the accessory spaces, right?
Correct. There's not a ton that
so-
have been issued.
So realistically, while we're dealing with the majority of the county, there's a very small, minute amount of individual locations that are going to be, that are even in this category of buildings and spaces.
Correct.
The other thing you have to remember is you got individuals that live next door to these places, and that if we continue down this path, you will have commercial-like activities with people living next door. They thought they bought a nice, quiet residential space.
Well, and that's where the permitting comes into play, that we want people to be seeking permits, correct? Right.
So again, the text amendments that are to be voted on today are to bring our current rules into compliance with the state law, meaning we have to allow rentals as little as 7 days. We have to bring that into law. The other part is to remove the allowance for sleeping places in our sheds and garages, so they cannot be rented out separately. And then the Resource Planning Committee can take that up and have further discussions after that.
But that second part is not part of the state. No.
The state law says that anything that has a sleeping place can be rented out.
Right.
So because we have been allowing bunkhouses in garages that may not have any bathroom or kitchen, those can be rented out separately
For 7 days.
for seven days. But the state law says we have to allow that.
Any other questions?
Is it clear as mud?
Clear as mud.
Yeah, just a comment or a question kind of moving forward as a county. With so many of these Airbnbs and different ways of renting out, they pay taxes on them. It'd be nice to have statistics as data from 5 years ago to 3 years ago to even a year ago on how our county is changing in that fold, since we are having long-term housing concerns and affordable at that. So if that can become available, maybe not to that directly committee, but I think that's an issue we should look at getting information on.
It's nearly impossible.
Question. Are we being asked to vote on both of these things as one item right now? Accepting the new rules from the state and disallowing sleeping? I'm trying to get clarity on what we're being asked to do right now.
Basically, now, if I have this right, I don't want to speak on this because I know as chairman of RPC, we're going to be discussing what you people are addressing at a later date. I don't feel it's appropriate to address it now. Basically, we are asking, and I'm seeing smiles from Dave over there, basically what we are asking now is to vote on this text amendment, which will bring Door County into compliance and with the state. All right, that's it. Don't get hung up on the rest of it. We discussed this at our meeting. We know we're going to have to go back and address the issues that you folks are bringing up. That's not part of this.
So we're not disallowing secondary sleeping places at this time? We're just voting to bring this 7-day?
Right.
Okay.
Just treat it as a legislative decision that makes really little sense to the average homeowner that has been very complicated for the department to resolve and come into compliance with.
Any other questions? Okay, we're going to go to the
Voice vote.
because we're accepting the report. It's only accepting the report. Okay. So voice vote to accept the report. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now I'd like to make a motion to adopt the mandatory zoning ordinance 2018-16, which is an amendment to the text of the Door County Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance.
Second.
So this would be voting on the actual change
Correct.
as in the report to bring into compliance
With the
with
state.
current state statute requirements. John?
What happens if we don't comply with the state?
Right.
Took the question right out of my mouth.
You're going to answer to them.
Yeah.
Gotta go to-
I mean, our zoning ordinance has to be in compliance with the state law, and we simply will not enforce any provision of the zoning ordinance that does not comply with the state law. So on balance, it's best to have our zoning ordinance match up with the state regulations. And what you have to understand here, the state regulations were directed at Airbnbs, vacation rental by owners, and it was the state's frustration with too many local rules. They wanted to not have a patchwork quilt of regulations. They wanted one regulation coming from the state, and that actually makes perfect sense in this regard. And as was stated, once we are in compliance with the state law, staff can make recommendations to the Resource Planning Committee on what the next step is or isn't. So,
Kathy?
The main thing is the 30 days to 7 days. Really, right? I mean, that's the main thing here. And then they're going on with the other problems, right? So.
Ken?
They are not problems, they're
Well,
simply
right.
situations that will be addressed at a later time.
It's not going completely away, you're going to
No.
be further discussion.
Dan?
I thought the state requirements allow you to rent it out daily, not 7 weeks.
Right.
Or 7 days. Is that correct?
Sue?
She bailed out.
Dan's neighbor has a permit saying so.
What?
Your neighbor has a permit saying so, I believe.
But you're talking about the city versus the county, too.
Yeah.
But the city is part of the county.
But the city has its own zoning.
But the city is part of the state.
No, no.
No, the
You're only
county
talking about county zoning.
zoning within the city.
I understand the county doesn't control anything in the city, but the state does. Don't they? So if the state allows it, the state allows it in the city, I don't know.
I'm sorry. I
Did
thought
you hear
I
the
was
question?
done. So I'm going to defer to Grant as far as the legalities, but when it comes to what we are regulating, we have to allow as little as 7 days, not less than that, but 7 days. And maybe Grant can speak to those rentals that are less than 7 days. Maybe they do not qualify for short-term rental. Grant, can you speak to that?
No, I mean, the only thing I can speak to is what we are doing here is, in terms of the secondary dwelling units, up until this point, we've limited their rental for a period of less than 30 days. By virtue of state law, we cannot limit it to now for a period less than 7 days. What you have to remember is most of the other stuff is going to fall under the jurisdiction of something other than the county. The county regulates the land use, but, for instance, I don't want to get too far off course, with Airbnbs or vacation rental by owner, if you don't have a bathroom in the sleeping quarters, you're probably in violation of state law and shouldn't be renting. Otherwise, it's not a state law, it's something to do with the building code. So we're just talking about uses allowed under the Door County ordinance and the restrictions on those uses that we're allowed to impose under 5969. And again, the state has dictated we have to reduce the period that we regulate from 30 days down to 7 days. So in terms of daily rentals, what I suspect you will see is if I rent the house next to the ends, I'm going to shake my head, say, yep, I rented it for 7 days. The fact that it was only there for 2.
Prove it.
And nobody's checking up on it. These things are largely flying under the radar, so.
But you can't be more restrictive.
Correct, we can't be more
Which
restrictive than the
is
state.
what we were.
Biz?
Well, I was going to comment on that this is going to be, I think, very hard to enforce, maybe unless there's a complaint. If someone calls in and complains about the neighbor, then maybe it can be checked into, but a lot of it's going to go undetected, and it'd be very hard to enforce. I would agree with Ken, maybe we shouldn't get into a real big discussion, but, the amount of bedrooms in a house determines on how large your septic system is. If you're out in a rural area, if you're a 2-bedroom, you're at 750. If you're a 3-bedroom, you're at 1,000 for your septic system. And I have neighbors that are renting out to like up to 4 families in a 3-bedroom house, and there's so many cars that they don't even have room to park. They are out on the street. So I don't, unless there's a complaint, I see it's going to be really hard to enforce.
Anybody else? That will go to the voter board for the ordinance. Has passed on a vote of 16, I'm sorry, 17 yes, 1 no, and 3 absent. Okay, we are going to take a 10-minute recess, and then we'll come back to our agenda. Okay, is everybody ready? Ken? Everybody ready to go? Okay. For the next item, it's discussion only. Please note that, discussion only, no action will be taken today. Reclassification of jail and other positions for protective occupation participants to general under 40.061D and 40.0248A and 111.70 Wisconsin statutes. I will go back up to public comment. I will allow anybody in the audience to make a public comment. I won't limit the time, just like we did with the administrative committee. I just ask that everybody doesn't get up and repeat the same information. So who would like to go first? Sheriff?
Thank you for the opportunity to give our stance from the Sheriff's Department on this. The Door County Sheriff's deputies in the jail have been under protective status since 1975. Before the implementation of Act 10, it was about a 50-50 split throughout the counties in the state, protected versus general. After Act 10, there were approximately 20 more counties that changed to general employee status for the jailers. The Wisconsin Department of Administration, in a letter to the Badger Sheriff's Association, state, "We can find no legislative directive whereby Act 10 requires a county to change, reclassify, or remove its jailers or corrections staff from the protective occupation status and reclassify them as general employees." This was brought to the WDA because some counties were told that they were required by Act 10 to classify jailers as general employees. The counties that did make the change, did so in a way to cut costs and eliminate bargaining positions. The state has not reached out to counties with protective status telling them they had to change. Our jail deputies have been under protected status for over 40 years, and in no time that I am aware of has the state said we are in violation of any statute. The ETF website reports the standard an employee must use, employer must use, to determine whether an employee should be reported to the WRS as protected versus general employee include active law enforcement or active fire suppression or prevention, frequent exposure to a high degree of danger or peril, a high degree of physical conditioning. Those are the 3 requirements. The ETF board has previously interpreted principal duties to require that 51% of the employee's duties must be spent in active law enforcement. Active law enforcement includes being actively, currently, and directly involved in detecting and preventing crime and enforcing laws or the ordinances of a participating employer. Wisconsin statutes list specific positions typically qualifying as protective, such as police officers, firefighters, and deputy sheriffs. However, bearing one of those titles does not automatically confer protected status. The employer must still evaluate whether at least 51% of the employee's duties meet the 3 criteria. It is my position as the sheriff that our jailers do meet the 3 criteria established by the ETF. I don't believe anyone would be in disagreement that working in the jail is a dangerous job. With the ever-increasing influx of inmates with mental health issues, drug dependencies, our county jails have become the mental health holding areas for the state. We have more use of force reviews coming from the jail than on patrol. Our hiring practice has been to hire a new deputy, and they are assigned to the jail to begin their career. They are sent to complete a physical agility test they must pass before they are even hired. The act of law enforcement is what is being debated. In a ruling by the ETF board on an appeal by many jailers, chose 5 positions from Chippewa County to use as an example. Their ruling stated they did not meet the criteria that 51% of their duties were law enforcement. The Outagamie Sheriff was attempting to reverse their general status back to protected and asked the administrator of the Wisconsin Department of Employee Trust Funds for clarification whether the ETF would challenge a county's decision to reclassify its county jailers from general to protective for retirement purposes. In an email to the Outagamie Sheriff's jail captain from the administrator of the Division of Retirement Services, Matt Storr, he states the following. The recent decision on the county jailer's appeal did provide some additional guidance for employers that make the employee classification determination, but did not require counties to change jailer classifications one way or the other. The classification remains an employer determination based on whether the duties of the employee meet the statutory criteria. When we hire someone, they are considered deputy sheriffs. The general summary of the job description between jail and patrol are almost identical. The only difference is the jail does not investigate traffic accidents. 14 and soon to be 15 of our jail deputies are certified law enforcement. They can be used on transports, boat patrol, snowmobile patrol, and security at festivals. It is my opinion that our jail deputies participate in active law enforcement on a daily basis as much as a patrol deputy. They do investigations of criminal activity in the jail. They do not call in patrol to take care of these items as some jails do. They conduct interviews of suspects and witnesses. They forward charges to the DA. They are active in crime prevention and citizen safety, including the court security deputies. They are basically doing the same job as a patrol deputy, only on the inside of a building. If you consider seeing a patrol deputy driving down the road in a squad, wondering what they're doing, they are looking for anything suspicious, whether there's an open door, a speeder, something out of place. Well, the jailer does the same thing, but instead of driving, they're walking down a corridor, checking jail cells, looking for anything suspicious within the jail. Wisconsin, the state of Wisconsin has saw fit to include prison guards, probation and parole agents under the protected status. You may be told that prison guards are paid $17 an hour, and that is true. But the state cannot fill those positions, and the guards are working 16-hour shifts and costing the state millions in overtime. The prisons cannot retain people for that wage. Prison guards are doing the same job as a county jailer. How can you say that 51% of their job is law enforcement and not a county jailer? The state has taken care of their own. I ask the county to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Pat McCarty. I'm the Chief Deputy. I just want to echo the comments of Sheriff Delarwell and add a little bit of my own insight. Our patrol deputies handle roughly 8,000 calls a year. And the nature of those calls can be probably broken down into a couple of different things. problem solving, conflict resolution, and crisis intervention. And our jail deputies do those same skills on a daily basis in the jail, except we don't track it by call number. Currently, the way we are structured, when we hire an employee, they begin their career in the jail, and they progress out to patrol when a vacancy becomes available. And it's those skills, that crisis intervention, that problem solving, that conflict resolution, those skills that they learn in the jail provides for their ability to transition out to patrol where they're visible and kind of the base of Door County. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Everyone. I'm Tammy Sternert. I have ran the correctional facility since we opened basically in 2007. So the sheriff did an excellent job and chief deputy basically explaining their perspective, and I wholeheartedly agree with everything. There's just a few things that I in that building every day. So our deputies are just that. They are deputies. There are agencies that will use correctional officers, and the big difference is when they hire correctional officers, those individuals aren't coming aboard as a law enforcement officer, so their educational requirements are different. So if they have something that happens inside of their jail, they're calling people off of the patrol to take care of those situations, which oftentimes then requires overtime on the patrol side of things to do it. In our department, as the sheriff said, the majority of our people are dual certified, so they come to us with a law enforcement background and certification. And what they do every day is not an easy job, I can tell you that. But we do a really good job with the amount of people that we have. We also bring in a ton of revenue for the county, which I think is important. And because we use that revenue not only for things we need within the county, but to improve the services we provide to the inmates. So I think that's important. The men and women that do it every day, you know, they come to work, and I think as a county, we do have an obligation to treat them the same as we would a patrol deputy. My biggest concern for them is the duty disability. So, as Sheriff said, the individuals that we deal with, it just gets more and more complicated. They come in, a lot of drug issues, a lot of mental health issues. Our use of force incidents are on rise, not that because we want to, but because the people that we're presented with, they just, you know, it's a situation where they are put in danger. So we have to often do physical things that we could get injured doing. So we try to do that. We train them. That qualification that they have is just the same as a patrol officer. It's just that we do it inside of a building. And as Chief Deputy said, that's where a lot of the young officers learn how to communicate with people. And 25 years in law enforcement, I think communication is huge. And we are the training ground, basically the correctional division. But there are individuals that choose to stay in corrections. So they're still deputy sheriffs, regardless of what you have them doing within that facility or within the community. And I think ultimately, I see a lot of jail administrators throughout the state, and I would disagree with a comment that had been made previously about turnover rates, because I think that is important. There is a direct correlation between protective status and turnover rates. If you do the research, there are counties that their turnover rates have doubled or tripled even because they took protective away. You have individuals that start a career in corrections and they'll leave to go to the private sector, and on exit interviews, if you ask them why, most of it is because of the environment and the protective status, because they are dealing with individuals that potentially could harm them. And again, I think as a county, we have an obligation to protect the people that we ask to protect us. And that is the same regardless if you're working in a building or outside. So thank you for your consideration. And I just hope that people take the time to evaluate it. It's not as simple as a dollar amount. It really affects a lot of different things in the county. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Good morning.
Good morning. My name is John Delabrew. I'm a part-time jail deputy here at Door County. I have I came from Kewaunee County. I worked 7 years there, half my time protected and half my time unprotected. I guess my experience with it is once you go unprotected, the morale of the jail goes down. Turnover starts. It pretty much just ripped apart. I consider them, best friends and family because of the situations that we went through in that building and stuff like that. I went from being middle of the pack seniority to the most senior male in about a year and a half after we went unprotected. When I left Kewaunee County, I was working full-time with benefits. I think I was at $27 or $28 an hour. Health insurance that I provided with myself and my family. And I left there to come to Door County because of the protective status. We took a financial hit because I have to start out part-time. That was over a year and a half ago. I'm still part-time. I don't know when I'm going to go full-time. It all depends on retirements and that. But the opportunity to have to be protected again is what I came here for. Like Lieutenant Sternhardt said, the duty disability is the biggest thing. When I go into those cells with the mentally ill inmates or suicidal inmates, if they don't care about their well-being and they want to die, they're not going to care about if they hurt us at all either. It's not technically their fault. Some of these inmates do want to hurt us on purpose, but some of these inmates don't. But if I want to know if something happens to me, that my wife and my child will be taken care of. Because if you take our protection away, we would just get regular disability compared to duty disability. If we are protected, it's 3 times more. So if I know if I get injured and I can't work, or God forbid something else worse happens, I know that they're okay. And I feel that gives me a peace of mind and makes me do my job better because I know I can go in there and count on the county backing me up with what we do. And this just isn't just me, I'm just speaking from my experience, but this is all of us. Also with the unprotected status comes a higher retirement age. Right now we can retire at, I think, 53 or 54, depending on when you were hired after Act 10. If you go to unprotected, it's 63. I did some research, and from the National Criminal Justice Reference Service, and that's a government agency, the average correctional officer's lifespan is 59 years old, meaning that probably over half of people wouldn't make it to their retirement at 63 due to, they said, stress and sleep patterns with the shift work, because we are 24 hours. So I'm guessing I'm asking you, to take that into consideration, because I'd like some time to fish sometimes when I retire, something like that. Maybe see my grandchildren at some point. And that's important. It's hard for me, and I'm emotional about it because I've seen what it did to Kewaunee County. I talk to those guys regularly. They're still my friends. I keep track with them, touch with them, and stuff like that. This is your decision. You have the legal authority to do it, but it's your decision. It's nobody else's. You're not required to do it. It's how you see it, how you see us. And I just want to, I hope you take the time. If anybody wants to talk to me, I'll give you my cell phone number. You can call me day or night, and I'll talk to you about anything about this. I'm also dual certified, and I just put in for the SWAT team. So I did speak to them, and they did say that I will be approved for the SWAT team. So if I go out on a SWAT call and I get injured or disabled, and another guy behind me who's on the patrol division gets injured, and we both have the same injury, both disabled the same way, and I'm unprotected and he's protected, I will fall under the general disability and get 3 times less than that officer, even though we risk the same going into those situations. I thank you for the time to to speak here today. And thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is TJ Perrins. I represent the Door County Deputy Sheriff's Association. And I'd just like to address a couple of things. Like the sheriff said, when your people are hired, they're hired as deputy sheriffs. They have to have the same education, the same conditioning, the same physical conditioning when they are hired and then throughout their careers. There is no difference in, and one of the criteria is high degree of physical conditioning. There is no difference between a jail security officer and a patrol deputy. They're all deputy sheriffs. So I think you need to look at that. And when you get hired here, one of the big things is the protective status and the ability to advance if that's the career path that you want. But also, if you want to be in the jail, you can go back and be a security officer. So there is the ability to do that, which makes this job more attractive than a lot of other jobs. The other thing that you need to look at that was brought up by a couple of different people, but when you look at the job duties that your security deputies have, it's a lot different than in a lot of other jails around. What they do here, they do their own investigations. They, like it was told to you, they refer charges. They write their own citations. Most other counties that I'm familiar with will call in a road deputy, will call in a patrol deputy to come in to do, or an investigator, to come in to do the investigations, to write the citations, to refer the charges, to write those reports. Your security deputies do those things. So they are doing active law enforcement on a daily basis. The degree of dangerousness, like was said, when you think about that, in the prisons, that those correctional officers have this status, the protected status. When somebody comes into the jail and they have mental health needs, they have alcohol or drug dependencies, or they're high on drugs or alcohol, they're uncontrolled at that time. They're brought in to that facility, and these people are taking care of them when they aren't in treatment, when they are just coming down, when they're detoxing, when they are having their worst mental health issues. And if they go to the prison, there are programs. There's help for them to do it long term. They can get certain medications. They can get in certain treatment programs. They're not going to be taking the drugs. Whereas your security deputies are dealing with these people right off the street. And the things that they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis is just as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than patrol deputies, because they're in a close proximity with a lot of these people. It is a very dangerous job. So I think we are putting together some information regarding exactly what your deputies do, your security deputies do, compared to what the road does for the committee meeting next month. But I just wanted to let you all think it is not such an easy decision. This is not a money decision. When you think about the great police force that you have, the deputy sheriff's force that you have, the dedicated people. We were at the committee meeting, I think it was last week. Kewaunee County said that after they went from protective to unprotected status, their average retention, or their average person, had 2.2 years of service. Yours has approximately 10 in security, is my information. You're getting long-term people that are dedicated to protecting the citizens of Door County. That's worth money, protecting the citizens of Door County. And I think we need to take a look at this situation. You need to take a look at all of the factors here. Don't just look at the money, but look at the citizens of Door County, look at your employees, and look at everything. And we'll get you some more information to come up for the next meeting. But I wanted you to start thinking about these things when you're thinking about this or you're getting information. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. My name's Kerry Jeancourt. I've been with the county for 23 years now, born and raised here. I didn't know if I was going to talk this morning or not, but there's some faces out here that you know me. I worked with some of you guys. I've worked next to you, seen you around. I hired on 23 years ago with the department, bachelor's degree in criminal justice, came to the county with the expectation of doing the job that I'm doing. Started out in the jail for 3.5 years. I'm your poster child. I went on the road for 7 years, transported inmates, came back into the jail when we opened the Justice Center. I'm a supervisor on the midnight shift right now. Still, I feel I'm a sheriff's deputy. I supervise, I make decisions, I protect, I provide for my people that I work with side by side. I provide for them as far as deputies go to make sure that they're safe. And at no point in time did I look ahead and want to be standing here today just to let you know that the last thing I wanted to hear about is a chance that somebody's going to pull the rug out. So I just ask you, as this goes down the hall or wherever it goes, just keep that in mind. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Tom Brown. I live up in the Sister Bay area. I come from Los Angeles, California. I don't have a background in law enforcement. I actually work in the insurance industry. For most of my career, I investigated and negotiated lawsuits. I would suggest that one of the things you need to take into consideration is the risk management aspect of what you're considering. Because what I haven't heard discussion of is what's going to happen when you have these people who come to you in a civilian status who otherwise could not be employed by the same county because they don't meet the requirements. They don't have the same training as your law enforcement officers. What happens when there's a significant incident and it falls in the lap of the county? We live in a very protected environment. You know, kids can walk down the street, you know, somebody's not going to call the police because you're walking your dog. You allow your child to walk a dog. That's because we live in a very protected environment. The fact that you have the opportunity of grooming your future road enforcement officers in the jail gives the county and the law enforcement department the opportunity of making sure they're right for the job. How many times do you see on the news today that an unfortunate incident has happened and someone has created a terrible incident, perhaps with a firearm, perhaps taking someone's life, and they were new to the job? First day, first week, they haven't had the time to develop the skills and the knowledge necessary to respond. So that's a serious consideration. It has nothing to do with money. It has nothing to do, it may have something to do with money in the long term, because typically it's the county or the responsible department that winds up settling with the family when one of these tragedies occur. The other thing is, because your correctional staff has the same physical and educational and otherwise police education requirements, they're ready and able to step up in the event they're called. I know some of your correctional staff are on the SWAT team. I know that some of them are training officers. I know that one is your hostage negotiator for the county. These are people you can call upon in dire straits. You can't call upon a civilian without the training and skill set to do that. And the fact of the matter is, as one of the gentlemen just said, he rotated out of the correctional facility onto the road, and after a lengthy period of time, he's come back. That was not a loss. I mean, you've developed a well-rounded police officer. You have a very wonderful county. That's why I continue to live here. It's like no other place I've ever lived. And aside from purely financial decision, I think there's so many more considerations here beyond whether it's 51% or what it might save you than perhaps has been discussed up to this point. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Scott Lohman. I've been working for the county for just over, or coming on 8 years. I'm the second shift supervisor sergeant in the jail. First of all, I would like to take this opportunity to thank this county for hiring me. I feel fortunate to be an employee of this county and this department. I'm not going to repeat a lot of things that was said, but I would say this. What the county has right now is unique. You have a great staff in that jail and in this department. Our administration is excellent, and as we move forward to the next sheriff, I consider it to be a win either way for the county. When we look at this and you look at it in a total, I guess in its totality, you're doing a lot for me, but I'm trying to do a lot for you too. And I think generally, as you look into it, you're getting a lot of people with their oar in the water and working hard for the county. As my lieutenant stated, we're working oftentimes at minimum staffed, and as everyone involved in this, in the jail operations and administration said, these jobs are not getting any easier. It's just unfortunately a fact of life. But you have employees right now in place that roll with it, make the best of it, and make good decisions for the county and for the department and for that inmate or for that citizen. So, closing, I'd just like to say thank you again, but please take a look at the big picture on it. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Joseph Dahlhoff. I am a full-time deputy with Door County Sheriffs. I am initially actually from the Madison area, and I'd like to thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to move up here. I would not have felt comfortable moving up here without protected status, nor would I feel comfortable assisting the county with translating for Spanish in the capacity I have done. I've both worked in the jail to translate, for patrol, and for investigations. If we lose protected status, I don't know if I'll feel comfortable staying up here because I do not have any support network outside of what comes through the department. So in short, I'd just like to thank you guys for giving me this opportunity, and I really hope that it remains for me able to stay up here.
Thank you. Anybody else? If not, we'll close public comment. Thank you. Okay, I will turn this over to Ken and Grant and Kelly.
Sure. So Grant, why don't you start us off?
Okay, if I go?
Yep.
Well, hi. Good morning. For those of you that are on the administrative committee, this is going to be somewhat of a repeat, but I want to start with kind of defining the issue why we're here. And before I go there, I should say that this is for information purposes only. I'm here to answer any questions you have. The materials that I included in the packet for this discussion start at page 36 and run through page 53. Kelly and Ken have included some other materials. But the primary issue here is whether the jailers should be classified as protective occupation participants under the statutes or as general. And that is, I think, the primary issue that we need to consider here, at least at the start. One of the issues that came up at the administrative committee is why now? And I think that dovetails back into Act 10. As Steve indicated, he's absolutely correct. Act 10 does not require the change. What Act 10 did, however, as most of you will remember, is remove the ability to be represented for collective bargaining purposes from everybody except public safety employees. So if the county makes the decisions that jailers should not be classified as protective occupation participants for the Wisconsin retirement system purpose, then under Act 10, the jailers cannot be in a collective bargaining unit with public safety employees and would be treated as general municipal employees. So what does that mean? And I think that's what we hope, or what I hope is a takeaway, is what does a change from protective occupation participant status to general mean? It would mean that those employees would no longer be represented. What that means then is that those employees, much like the vast majority of the county employees, wages, hours, and other conditions of employment fall within the exclusive control of this body, the county board. And you would be able to decide what hours they worked, what the conditions of employment were, as you do with all the other general municipal employees in the county, which are the vast majority of the county employees. So that's one change, and I think one of the more significant changes that would take place. The county would not need to, and certainly might want to consider keeping the status quo in terms of qualifications coming in the door. Just because you change from protective occupation participant status to general municipal employee status for the jailers doesn't mean that you have to lower the bar, lower the qualifications. If you look at the case from the Wisconsin Employment Trust Fund Board, they made it perfectly clear that somebody can be called a deputy sheriff and still be a general municipal employee in the context of being a jailer. And I want you to read the case. I'm not going to go through it with you. I think we'll have plenty of opportunity to do that at the next administrative committee, because the members of that committee have had the case now for 2 or 3 weeks, and we'll have had it for a month. But I think one of the takeaways from today is you don't have to drop or minimize or change the qualifications. The qualifications coming in the door can stay exactly the same. I think the difference is it's entirely up to you, versus having to bargain the issue with the collective bargaining unit. You can determine what the qualifications are coming in the door. And if you don't think it's a good idea to lower the qualifications, you don't have to. But again, it's a county board's decision if they're deemed general municipal employees. The jailers may still serve as a feeder for the patrol deputy positions as they do now. That doesn't have to change simply because the jailers change from protective occupation participant status to general for the Wisconsin retirement system purposes. That decision is entirely up to the county board. It can change, but it doesn't have to. There was some discussion with respect to other concerns like liability. I mentioned this to the administrative committee. Somewhere in the range of 60 to 62 of the 72 counties have made this change, and that has occurred over the past probably 2 decades. Steve gave a fairly accurate representation. There was a big push right after Act 10 got passed for about a dozen counties to change, and I think it ended up being in a range of 20. But prior to that, it was about 50-50. So we have a good baseline of experience with people who work in the jail, jailers being protective occupation participants and being general municipal employees. We know, if you've been on the board for any period of time, there are basically 2 general liability insurers for counties: the Wisconsin County Mutual, WCMIC, and WMIC. And there's been no indication coming out of our comprehensive general liability insurer, which is WMIC, that change has equated to an increase in liability or the increase in claims on the part of the county. Again, it's how you handle it. And if you make the change and you maintain the qualifications, you allow it to be a feeder to the road, and you keep things pretty much the same, because I agree with everybody that has spoken today, is our jail is very well run, and there's no reason to change the way you're doing that. And again, you're going to hear me repeat myself, but I think it needs to be repeated. If the change occurs, what happens in the jail then is up to the 21 members of the county board in terms of the qualifications of the employees, the training they get, the opportunity they get for transfer, their compensation. Are these still going to be good jobs? That's up to you. You could take the pay down to $17 or $18 an hour like the state did, and you're going to have those issues, but you don't have to. And Kelly's going to talk a little bit more about that. Transitioning back to the case law, I think it's pretty well settled with the 2016 case that jailers, when the positions have been reviewed by the Wisconsin Employment Trust Fund Board, who has the authority to review and determine whether a position, be it a jailer or any other, qualifies for protective occupation participant status or not. When they have reviewed jailer positions, 100% of the time they have determined that they are not protective occupation participants, rather they should be classified as general municipal employees. When those cases have been appealed to the Wisconsin courts, from my research, 100% of the time, the Court of Appeals has upheld the Wisconsin Employee Trust Fund Board's decision. So that gives you an indication that jailers probably should be qualified as general versus protective occupation participant status. Based on that, I'll let you read the cases. I also included the statute in the material that is attached to the agenda. That leads me to the next point. It's not fair. In some cases, you could even say it's arbitrary, but when you look at the list that's in the statute of positions that are presumptively protective occupation participant status, corrections officers or county jailers are not there. Road deputies are. Paramedics are. Corrections officers for the state are. So they don't have to meet the same test that a position that isn't on that list. And what I would point out to you is, while it might make, in terms of some sort of fairness, there be a comparison, the state has already decided there isn't a comparison. The positions on that list are protective occupation participants, period. And the county jailer position is not. So you have to apply, and I'm not going to go through it because you've heard it enough, the three-part test that is set out in the statute and explained in the ETF board decision and the case law. I guess the final point, and I'm being far briefer and hopefully a little bit more clear than I was at the administrative committee, I think I was trying to make an argument to an appellate court there, is you have the ability to make the decision, but your decision, much like we talked about earlier in zoning, should be, and I would even say must be, in accordance with the law. You know what the test is, you know what the ETF board and the cases have said, and one thing I'll mention in that regard, you read through the ETF board case, they're abundantly clear that law enforcement activities that the jailers argued there that occur inside the jail, where they are detecting crimes inside the jail, don't meet that minimum requirement under the statute. So, I mean, that's I think a fairly significant point. Again, look through the decision. The jailers in that case argued that as part of our custodial responsibilities, we are watching for crimes occurring inside the jail. The Wisconsin Employee Trust Fund Board said that is not enough. So that decision has already been made. The Wisconsin Employee Trust Fund Board also, in terms of the second two requirements, that frequent exposure to a high degree of danger or peril and high degree of physical conditioning, found that those did not exist with the 5 jailer positions that they considered in that case. And read through the decision yourself. It's not that long. It's fairly plain language. And again, whether you think it's fair, whether you think it's right, many of us didn't think Act 10 was right, but we had to do what we needed to do with Act 10. With this, you really need to apply the law to the positions that are in front of you. And in terms of the negative impacts or the benefits, what I will leave you with in closing is that is largely dependent on what this board does if it opts to classify these employees as general versus protective occupation participants. The ball would be entirely in your court with respect to whether or not the jail continue to operate as it does now. Nothing really needs to change. And if you chose to, yes, you could dumb down the qualifications, you could cut the pay, cut the benefits, and make it not be a desirable position, but you don't have to. And that doesn't necessarily follow that because somebody goes from protective occupation participant to general municipal employee status that those bad things happen. Finally, with respect to what will happen with the existing employees, because I think there is a sense of equity and fairness involved there, and Kelly's going to address that in more detail, but it is entirely within your purview to do what you did with the employees who were impacted by Act 10, and that's grandfather them at certain levels in terms of their wages and their employment, their benefits and things of that nature. So it's not all of a sudden, okay, we're losing our protective occupation participant status and everybody's going to go down to $17 an hour without benefits. And I think, in my view, you treated the employees at transition from being represented to non-represented when Act 10 came through in a fair manner, and there's no reason to believe you won't treat the jailers in that manner if they go from protective occupation participant status to general. But again, the ball's in your court. It would be entirely your decision as to what you do if that change is made. So with that, I'll entertain any questions you have. I see Ken.
I have 2.
Okay.
If we go to general as opposed to protected, the jailers no longer can be sworn in deputies. Is that true or not?
Not true.
They can still be sworn in deputies.
Yes.
They can have everything that goes along with being the same as a road deputy. It's just that when they're or an investigator, they have all the enforcement powers.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that when they are doing work in the jail, starting out as a jailer, they are unprotected.
They would be deemed general versus protected, correct?
Right.
And the test there, if you look at the ETF board case, is they talk specifically about that, is that somebody's being a sworn deputy doesn't necessarily mean that they're protective occupation participant status. When you look at the 3-part test, particularly the 51% active law enforcement, the board and the courts have looked at what the employees actually do on the ground each and every day, if they're in the jail or on the road or whatever. So.
Okay. Now I have more questions, but I'm going to stick with the 2.
Okay.
My second question, you mentioned that that EMTs are protected. I thought you said at the admin meeting they are considered non-protected or general, and that Waushara County, the only other county that has a countywide EMS service, those employees are non-protected.
That is correct.
Okay, I wanted to make that clear because that's going to be a discussion we're having later on. But
And I can explain the distinction because I think it's important. What the statute does, if you look on page 53 of your materials, I hate to just get a chuckle out of this, but 48 sub BM, where it says protective occupation participant, it says includes any participant who is an emergency medical services practitioner if the participant's employer classifies the participant as a protective occupation participant and notifies the department of the same. And then it goes on to say that an employer may classify an emergency medical services participant as a protective occupation participant even if they don't meet the definition of active law enforcement or those other 2 tests. So there's an affirmative exception in the statute that says the county can ignore that three-part test and classify, if the county wants to, the paramedic EMTs as protective occupation participant status. We have chosen to. We're not required to.
Thank you.
Thank you. Or anybody else? Sue?
At admin, we talked about that if, I don't know how I'm going to ask this, that we would need to change the requirements and change the duties if we wanted our jail staff to meet those three criteria, that there would have to be a restructuring. Am I right in remembering that?
Yeah, if you look in the case, and what I was parroting in the 2016 ETF case is paragraph 45 on page 9 is, in theory, a jailer could present a case that the duties of the position are significantly different from those of the appellants in the board's past cases, but it goes on to say, for this board to find that, and that these positions are protective occupation participants, it would have to abandon the position it has taken regarding jailers for the last 20 years and essentially ignore its own definition accepted by the Court of Appeals and Mattia for active law enforcement. So it's not a trivial task, and I don't know that it's practical.
Well, I guess what I'm asking is, I'd like to know what it would have to look like. It's going to be very important for me to make a decision here based on not this amorphous thing where the court said they don't meet the 51, but where we're supposed to somehow know. It would be really, I would need to have a sense of what that would look like. Why what they're doing now is not that 51%, if that makes sense. That's my, and it doesn't have to be today.
But I think the answer is what I referred to in that WTF case. It says law enforcement inside the confines of a jail as a jailer does not rise to that level. So you can take by intuition that they would have to come outside the jail and engage in active law enforcement. And, you know, again, the state did not include the jailers in the list of positions that are presumptively protective occupation participant status. So for them to be found that way, they have to meet the three-part test. And if we look through that WTF board decision, it addresses, I think, that issue relatively clearly on what has to happen. And we'll bring that we could bring the information, but, you know, it's going to represent a sea change in the way the, you know, department looks right now to pass legal muster, in my estimation. Yeah, and the other thing that we haven't talked about is, you know, we could actually ask for some guidance too from.
I think you have Kelly. Maybe have Kelly cover some of the stuff.
Okay.
Biz has a question.
Go ahead, Biz.
Wouldn't the sheriff have statute authority to assign the employee or the security deputy or the deputy sheriff to any position where he deemed necessary at any particular time?
I'm not following your question in terms of.
Well, for instance, one of the things that Kelly has in there, one of the duties of this jailer is to transport prisoners.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think under policy, or the way things are done, it takes two deputies to either go pick up a prisoner or to move prisoners in a transport.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, you're going to have a jailer or a deputy sheriff doing that, and possibly a patrol deputy. And there's going to be two different classifications if you make this general for the jailer. He's going to be sitting next to a person that is protective, and he's not. Is that fair? Is that really fair to have that happening? And that's one of the things that jailer can be assigned to.
Yeah, the transport, in the case, they address the issue of transport officer, and that could certainly take place, depending on the internal policy within the sheriff's department.
Well, I guess my point is it's totally not fair that there would be two different classifications and they're doing the same identical job. Same job. And now, you made the case that it's the amount of time that they're in that status of law enforcement or whatever. If you look at all these 18 positions, you can't tell, I know the state's got them in there,
And
but you can't tell me that they're anywhere near meeting that criteria.
They don't have to because the state's put them in that list, and that's why you can't compare them. You have to kind of
I know it, but I'm
step
just
outside of
saying
that.
that we should understand and I think the sheriff stated that the state has taken care of theirs, but they've left this that we're talking about up to the county board to make that decision.
Right. And the county board can still take care of theirs, whether they're protective occupation participant status or not. And again, you hit on it, it's the active law enforcement, 51% of the duties. Again, you look at that case, just because a jailer occasionally transports somebody and they go with a road deputy who is, again, presumptively protective occupation participant status, unless that comprises 51% of what they do, in a course of a day, you're not going to rise to that level. I've never argued it's fair. None of these things that have happened since Act 10 can be characterized as fair, but I guess what I feel obligated to do is bring forward what the legal status is, what you can and may or may not do, and what happens if you do take a certain course of action. And I think you need to think about all that, and certainly in your back of your mind what's fair and the list. But again, the list is the list, and we know that the positions on the list are protective occupation participant status, and the positions that aren't on the list are not, unless they meet the three-part test. So.
Okay, we're going to have Kelly come up, and we have 3 different pieces of information we need. We're starting to get into some of her information, so you'll all be able to get your questions asked. But.
Good morning. My part will be brief because Grant covered a lot of it. What I do want to touch on is when we did have approximately over 200 employees, we did transition them successfully in 2014. We held a number of sessions with small groups to hear what their concerns were and get in front of them and talk, and the biggest key to that was communication, to make sure that we could answer their questions and be clear on what changed for them. So I see that if, that's how this transition would work as well. We need to be in front and with these people and be able to communicate. On page 58, you have a quick facts and implementation outline. So it just gives you a very brief overview of some of the things that would change. In talking about the $17 that the state prisons pay, we had our consultant review our wages here in the county, and a fair wage is what he brought forward, and it works within our current compensation structure. That provides a starting rate of over $20 an hour. I think that's a very reasonable and fair rate of pay. Those current employees that we have, you have chosen to red circle those employees, so we aren't taking money away from them. We held their rate of pay so that it wasn't something that was demeaning. Training and experience, we've talked a lot about that. I don't see that changing. I think that we have as a robust training program as we want to design for our employees. I've worked very closely with administration, the sheriff, the chief deputy, the jail administrator over the past years, talking about and what that looks like for all of our security deputies and jailers. I work with the Civil Service Commission as well. There's testing involved. So there are a lot of different and moving pieces that occur when we go to hire. I see that staying very solid. I think it's important to make sure that those requirements are job related and that we constantly are looking at those. The recruitment process, I don't see that changing either. We go out, we use all of the mechanisms available today, including social media, to get people in as a security deputy that starts in our jail part-time. other point that I wanted to make was the retention. We are a good employer here in the county. We provide a very solid position in all of our areas. Our general municipal employees average is over 10 years, and I think that's important to keep in mind. I don't see that changing. So, thank you.
Grant did cover a lot of stuff for us. I won't cover too much information, but I will cover several things. I just wanted to finish up on the why now. Grant kind of brought it up, but again, I don't think he got away to the end. But the reason why we're bringing this up now is really because we're, as you know, we're entering into negotiations. Our contracts are expiring, and this obviously does have an impact on how we negotiate those contracts moving forward. So the reason why it did come up, again, if you look back, we had a contract under place starting in 2015 that got us to this date here. And really the cases that are provided in your packet, those were settled early 2016. So really when those, I guess, cases were decided, that was our, I guess, our window of opportunity to actually have consideration for that. I guess, you know, from our standpoint, we chose just to honor those contracts, and now as we go into negotiations, bring that up at this point in time. So this is a framework of why we're doing that now. Just a couple things I just want to kind of bring up. Obviously, the fiscal impact, if you go to page 57, I think the biggest thing to bring up, it is not a money grab. Again, if you looked at what was discussed both by Grant and by Kelly, the most important thing about this is how we treat the employee, and I think that's the key that we want to make. Our goal is still to treat the employee as fair as possible, and I think fair is being the key word. And that is our goal in moving forward. The fiscal impact, if you look, you can see what our full-time hours are. You can see our overtime. You can see the impact both on our FICA, our WRS cost, and I guess the difference in cost per position. Now again, if we move forward, a lot of these employees could be red circled, then they can move forward, and I think that's a way of treating them fair. But likewise, I think, again, I'm going to do the financial side, that's my responsibility, but as a taxpayer side, you guys have to look at that as well. What's fair? And is it fair to have that additional cost all the way through the organization? And is it fair for the taxpayers to pay that? That's a question that I have to bring up and look at fiscally. We can still treat the employees fair and move it forward, but as we move forward, we can bring in new employees that I guess are meeting the standards and being more equitable. I know one thing that was brought up in some of the meetings as well, why can't we just negotiate that? For us to be able to negotiate wages, overtime, WRS is insurmountable. If you've gone through negotiations, if you ask for something, you have to give something up for it. It's just part of negotiations. It's just a fact of life. So really, if you're looking at, we're talking, the biggest thing here was the protective status. There's a whole list of other things that no one else wanted to bring up. That's part of this. It's the overtime. It is our costs that we're paying extra towards WRS. It is our wages. Unfortunately, they're out of whack if you look at our comparables for all of our comparables that we use for our jailer positions. It's just a fact. And I think that's where some of the inequities and I think problems come in on the financial side. It's not that I don't think they do great work. It's just a matter of what's fair and how do we address this. The other thing I did wanted to bring up, and again, I totally respect both Pat and the sheriffs and all that, but if you look through all the cases and you've done actually a lot of the research, I know the Sheriff's Association is adamantly against any reclassification, and I respect that. That's their position. I will also bring up that I got this off their website, that there is a bill that's actually pending for the protective status for county jailers and where they could self-elect to become protective. So in other words, there's legislation that in essence will allow them a one time to be able to say, do you want to be protected? And you have an option to do that. And that would then give them the opportunity, if it was passed, and this is one of those things, for example, that as a county, if we feel that that's a significant issue that they brought up and we feel that, we could actually work with WCA, legislative committee, and actively support that bill and try to get that passed. To me, that's the protected issue. I still have to deal with all the other issues. I need to look at what are our equitable wages, what are our equitable overtime rates, what are our costs in operating that. So there's two parts of this, and unfortunately some of it does come down to money, but the money to me is more long-term where we're going versus saying, okay, I want to hurt the employees or take something away from them. I guess what I'm looking at is trying to transition us into a stronger financial position as the county moving forward. And if we can work with them to help lobby and get the protective status, I agree. That's fine. We can do that. The only thing, and that's the biggest thing in terms of, the pending legislation, because it did come up. It was tabled, but it is one of the things that we have heard that it's going to be one of the first items that's going to be coming out of the legislative agenda in spring, and we'll learn more about that at WCA when we go to the conference. This, I guess, in my mind, again, this timing moving forward is, again, I think a lot of the stuff that we'll hear, and this is kind of the hard part, and it actually goes back to Act 10, I think we all experienced that, is really the timing. We brought it forward to admin, and admin wanted to bring it here for discussion. I guess my goal would be to have it go back to admin, but then have it come back to county board for decision next month. It's just kind of one of those things, either we pull the Band-Aid off or not. And it's one of those things, I think the longer we let it sit, it hurts morale, it hurts our direction as a county, it hurts our negotiations. So I think we just need to do the research and make a decision to move forward. So we're going to be asking, I guess my goal, I'll be pushing for that next month in terms of a decision. I guess the biggest thing is, like everyone said, take a look at the big picture. I guess I asked you to take a look at the big picture. But also when you're looking at the big picture, just ask why. There's so much emotion tied to this, and I understand that and I respect it. But just take a lot of the comments. I wrote down all my notes in terms of all the comments that were brought up in terms of issues. So, for example, education. We're going to lose people. Why? Why is that going to happen? Is that part of the decision we're making today? Grant said it clear. We do not have to change the training. We do not have to change how we do our operations. We do not have to change how we treat our employees. So when people are bringing up stuff, the second they bring it up, think in the back of your mind of why. And why are we discussing it? And is it part of the core of the issue? And for example, we had the question on the risk and stuff like that. Why? Why does the risk change simply because they're unprotected? We're not going to get sued more. There's not other counties in the state that have higher court cases and stuff like that. So there's a lot of stuff. We're like a Velcro thing right now. I'm the Velcro, right? Everyone's going to throw stuff at it and try to make it stick. But I'm saying pull that stuff off and focus on the issue that's before you. The protective status is an issue. We can definitely discuss it. We could try to work with them to get, maintain a protective status should the legislation go forward. But from my standpoint, it is all the other stuff that no one does want to talk about. It is the wages. It is the benefits. It is the overtime. It's those things that affect our operations that right now we are an outlier where we are. Plain and simple. We have all the comps. They have the comps. We are an outlier in our operations. And my goal is to bring those back in. And this is a tool, whether you think like the Grant said, it's logic or not, that was a tool that was provided by Act 10. It's been tested through the courts, and it's a tool that we have before us. So really, from my standpoint, is where does the county go to put itself in the best position, both financially and how we move forward as an organization? Although it might be uncomfortable, and no one wants to discuss all this stuff, but where do we put ourselves in our best position moving forward? And again, try to work towards all these other things that we think are the critical issues and making sure we operate right. So again, it's a tough issue, but again, when you hear all that stuff, when you're going to get calls, we're all going to hear the stuff. But again, come back to the court and ask why, if it doesn't make sense. So the training's not going to work, we won't have good qualified people, why? I mean, why? Where does that come from? It's only ourselves spreading the fear of what's going to happen. There's no reason why we can't have someone come in and dedicate the training that we do now to make them just as qualified. So again, when they ask or bring up those issues, ask why. And is it the core to what you're trying to decide as a county board? So with that, we can take other questions.
Dan?
Over the years, I've been adamantly against the levy limits, and I've always said that things got to get worse before somebody starts to make the move on the levy limits. Is this whole thing a factor, casualty of the levy limits?
For us, it's a part of it. I mean, because let's face it, right now, the difference between, let's say, as you know, the emergency services outside the cap. This is within our cap. So if we put ourselves in a better position with, again, not trying to take away benefits of right now in terms of wages, like I said, if we'd red circle them, but if we have people coming in and now they start to follow that salary structure and they're paying their portion of WRS and stuff like that, that adds up as significant savings over time. And that's where it affects long-term our levy limit in essence of trying to drive down or stay underneath that cap. Either way, we're going to have the levy limit. But again, that's part of the fiscal impact of what we have.
Vinny?
I'm trying to understand how we can have the same level of service and the same level of training and the same level of commitment with less pay. I mean, not for the current person who say will redline their pay, but into the future, it doesn't seem logical to expect the same services for less money.
It's no different than what we did when we did some of the conversion to our other pay plan and when we do the analysis for our pay plan. What we do is we work with comparables that are defined within our pay plan, and we work with all the other counties, and we do, I guess, wage studies to compare all of our salaries. And if those wages are out of line, then in essence, what we've done historically is we've red circled them. And then they move forward, those stay at that position, but then the positions we hire coming in, they're at the new wage scale. So throughout the organization, when we went through Act 10 originally, we have positions where, whether they're admin or something like that, where we have admins that are red circled right now, but we have admins that are coming in at the new wage scale and they're working. The thing is not, again, we're not proposing to go down to the $17 an hour. What we're saying is that we want to pay well, and here's all the comparables, and this is where the wage is as a comparable, and we'll still pay you that good wage.
And we're the outlier because we still have we're one of the 10, I guess, if there's 62 that don't have it and 72 total.
Well, part of the outlier is being the protected status. Part of the outlier is this, our contracts, and how a lot of other ones actually differentiate between patrol and the jail. So that's part of the things that you could say they negotiated very well in terms of trying to maintain and keep that locked, stuff, and tied together. So, I mean, there's a lot of factors to it, but it's just the way, I guess you could say the negotiations went in the past, and now we're kind of in this position now.
Thank you.
Dave?
Yeah, it was stated before, and I certainly know this, that the jail system is partially used as a kind of a training for the road crew, the opportunity to get some experience, education, and that stuff, and then move out on the road crew. How many other counties do it a very similar way? Or is it treated as the jail is a completely different career from the road?
That I don't know. The only thing I can say, and again, it has gone back and forth. In fact, when we did the first contract, Steve, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we actually negotiated to not have that connection originally, and then we switched it back again. So we've gone back and forth internally, even on ourselves. So I'm not trying to put Steve on the spot, but Steve and I are both open on it. But again, it's one of those things. So I just want to make sure you guys are aware too that we've gone both ways in terms of whether or not we want to have the jail staff moving up through the ranks. So I understand the value now, and they want to keep it. But we also
I'm all for it. I was just curious what other 72
that I don't know
might run similarly. Helen?
Well, following up kind of on what Dave was saying, where does that then leave the fluidity that we have now, where somebody can start out in the jail, go to the road, come back to the jail, maybe with, as a supervisor, like we had one person say,
they
certainly valuable
they could still do that. They'd just be going from protected to non-protected back.
And does that then affect their wages and benefits and that type of thing? And then also I heard people say, that talking about incidents and being on the SWAT team, and would that deter people from wanting to go ahead and make those changes, get extra positions for themselves, maybe make themselves a more valuable employee? I don't know. That's a concern, I think.
A follow-up question to the employment aspect. By no means a comparative other than the fact that it's another department. In the highway department, if you start out as one position and you choose or ask or apply to go for another position, the comparable values change, your pay, your rates, all that stuff. And if you choose to come back down from that higher pay, those rates changes, everybody understands that. right now, if an officer goes from the jail or from road to jail, those dollar values don't change?
No.
Even though responsibilities clearly change?
Well, the duties, I mean, yeah.
Duties, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Bob?
I guess, and this is, I mean, I'm not on admin, so this is all fairly new to me, just reading the packet from the other day and listening to everything that's been discussed. It just seems like it's a real black and white thing we're trying to decide here, where isn't there some maybe middle ground where maybe wages have to be redlined if we're that far out of line with the rest of the counties in the state, or red circled or whatever, and yet still be protected? I mean, I can't get past the fact that someone's going to go on the SWAT team and they're at the same risk as somebody else, and they're not being protected the same way. That's not okay. I mean, that's just an example I have where, I mean,
Well, that's why I came back before. I think what you do is you back the legislation and allow them to make that election if we can get that through to be protected.
Well, that's still pie in the sky. That is not a law in the books right now. That is pie in the sky.
I know, but like you said too, though, I can't negotiate a red line. So if you can figure out that one for me, that ain't going to happen.
Susan?
That's the difference. I can't negotiate that stuff.
Right.
I have a small piece of answer to David's question. I don't know whether Dane County currently is protected or not for their jailers, but my nephew is a deputy in Dane County, and he told me this summer when he was visiting chapter and verse how Dane County begins in the jail, and they train their people and they use it as our sheriff's department does. And it also allows them, as the gentleman referred, to see those deputies that really it's not an appropriate career choice for them, and they can do some filtering as to those that then should not go on the road. So it is a practice, at least there, to go through the jail division first.
Dave?
Yes. You were looking in a different direction.
I know.
Just a clarification, earlier when the gentleman was talking about the SWAT team, I'm certainly presuming he is getting a surcharge or some additional pay rather than just simply choosing to be on another position. As far as protection goes, nope. Okay. Protection, that's a different story. The protective status we're talking about is employment protective status, those negotiations, not the protection aspect of that dangerous position.
John?
Help me understand this. If we would remove them from protective status, as a body here, we still have the authority to give them everything to get right now. Is that correct?
The only thing you don't have the authority to give them would be the WRS. Although what you could do is say, okay, you're going to pay the additional, was it 2-point-some%? It's in my thing. You could say, well, for this one-time conversion, we'd like to bump your pay to accommodate that change for the first time, but then moving forward, they'd have to pay their own WRS.
So in other words, we could do that, and then we would give them the same thing other than that, and then we still have the opportunity to negotiate with them where we want them to be and treat them fairly like we did in the highway department.
It goes back to what Grant says. You don't have to negotiate, but it's how you want to work with them and treat the employees, and you sit down just like we did before.
We'll forget the word negotiate, we'll talk like common folk.
Yeah, exactly.
Megan?
Just to piggyback on that question, one of my biggest concerns, along with a lot of the others that have been voiced, is the retirement age. So how would that, is that able to be negotiated
Again,
as well?
Not unless the legislation passes, no, they would not.
Okay, so we would have 64-year-old jailers having to be physical with inmates.
Okay, let's be careful on that one, because I guess my thing is that, again, that's one of those things, they throw it and stick. But I guess the question is...
No, I'm asking the question.
I know, but do they all choose to retire at that age? Do we have employees now that are above that age? And I guess, will we see more of that occur over time because employees have to figure out a way to pay for insurance? So if I retire at 52 or 53 or 55, until Medicaid kicks in, I got to figure out a way to get insurance, unless my spouse have it. So just to assume that we're going to have max exodus of people retiring and not have older individuals working the jail, I think is not a fair argument to take forward. It's definitely an opportunity they have, and it's something that's available, but to say that that's the way it's going to go, that's a poor assumption.
But please let me know, are there benefits at that retirement age? There are benefits that they are then receiving that they would not then be receiving if they were unprotected until later in life.
Correct. Because again, if you look at it, they're paying the whole idea is that they're paying and we're paying additional money each paycheck to accelerate the growth of their retirement funds. So that way they can retire, and hopefully those funds are at a certain point that they could cover that gap between, let's say, 55 or 65.
Kathy?
I think a lot of that, the age business came up years ago. When you were protective, you were required to retire at 55. It was mandatory, well, way back when in the horse and buggy days.
Nope.
But then that changed, that they weren't requiring you to do it anymore. So I think that that's kind of maybe where, and it was like you said, it was give and take. And I think the biggest problem when people are thinking about retiring, you can retire at any age. The big thing is the health insurance. Because you aren't required, or you aren't eligible for Medicare and the rest until you're 65. You can get Social Security at 62, but the health insurance is the biggie, I think, for a lot of people.
Well, there may be some in the room that don't know, but I guess I have to say it, that I'm a retired deputy sheriff. I was with the Door County Sheriff's Office for 30-plus years and spent, although I was in all the different positions, but I spent a good portion of my career in the jail. So much of what the administrator said and Ken said, I agree with. And I'm a county board supervisor now, and I feel one of my duties is to watch out for tax dollars, because that's what my constituents or people in my district, expect me to do. But I do have to bring out the fact that the sheriff sent out a lot of information to all his supervisors, as well as the two candidates for sheriff, Pat and Tammy, sent out stuff. John Cook, who's not here, is a retired deputy sheriff, and he sent out stuff, and he's not here. He's on sick leave. And I agree with all of those what they said, because I'm talking from experience. I was there. I know of the abuse. I know of the exposure in the jail and the potential for getting hurt, and it's high. Because you're dealing with prisoners, especially the ones that are coming in that are on drugs and they're intoxicated. You go through training every year, and it's all about, controlling prisoners and what you're up against, and probably you're exposed to more of that than a road person. Now, the potential of getting shot in the jail is less than a road deputy. But the reason I brought up that the sheriff by statute, can assign deputy sheriffs and put them where he wants. And when I was working in the jail, a lot of my career, I did road transfers. I did a lot of it. And I also served a lot of papers. And that's a dangerous job. When you go knock on, and I don't know if he's going to have jailers do that, but if you go knock on doors, most of the time, you're not bringing good news. I mean, it can be a lawsuit, it can be a divorce, subpoenas, warrants, repossessions, and maybe the sheriff isn't going to assign jailers to do that. But I went through all that, and I know about the danger. I was part of the negotiations back in the early 70s to get the jailers under protective. And the sheriff is right, it happened in 1975, so most of my career was under protective service. But I do agree with Ken. Our position as county is to watch the tax dollars, and I guess my hope is that maybe they could stay protective, but there needs to be some pay adjustment, especially for those starting out. That maybe it is up too high for the jailers, because most of their career maybe is in the jail, and maybe they shouldn't be making as much as the road. That can be debated. Maybe that'll come up in negotiations. And I've never been on the negotiations and probably shouldn't be because of being a past employee for over 30 years. But this is a tough one for me too, because I'm supposed to watch tax dollars, and yet I know of the potential for them getting hurt in the jail and what they go through. And probably 55 years old, especially if you start out, after high school, go through training and become a deputy sheriff, it is time to get out of there. I stayed till 56, but it was after I talked to the WRS and found out how much more I could improve my retirement by staying one extra year. Because I was in the Navy for 4 years and didn't start as early as some of these other kids. I was 25 when I started in 1968 and retired in 1998, 30-year career. So that's what happened before I got on the county board. So I just had to speak my piece of that. It's not all, a lot of people in this room, if you knew what those jailers went through in the jail and the things that could happen to you in the jail, you wouldn't want nothing to do with it. Because it can get bad, so.
Okay, so our intention from the administrative committee last week was to bring this to the floor today, have discussion, so you're aware of the issues, the positions, et cetera. So we have a month to ask more questions, think about it. It'll come back before the admin committee again next month. Depending on what the admin committee decides, it'll then come forward back to the board again, have the discussion for action. Next month would be the intention, so. Laura?
Can I just ask a questions for clarification? Mr. Pavick, what bill were you speaking about? Which bill was on that? I think that some of these questions just are going forth in the next month. You can think about and digest.
It's AB 676.
Great, thank you. Also, there was public comment and also on page 58, that's training and experience, correction training officer CTO program within the first 6 months. What is the cost that for somebody to for training, and is that extra or is that specifically just mandated by law? Is there a cost on that for that first year of a jailer or security officer?
Your CTO.
That's internal.
CTO is internal, so there's cost maybe as far as.
Can you come up to the mic?
The CTO is part of the requirements upon hire, so within 6 months they go through that program. It's done in the jail, so they shadow other staff members.
Is there a price on that then? Because they have to shadow, so they're not considered.
Right, we don't, there's not a book you purchase or anything like that. They might not be doing their regular duties.
The staffing cost.
But that's a staffing cost, so is that, $36,000? I heard some number being thrown out before that.
That was a number the sheriff threw out, and I don't know what he was basing that on.
Okay. So just looking at the numbers when they say they're unprotected, if they have a 2-year turnover and we're at an average of 10 years, and you're trying to look at what type of cost comes with that. But also then just questions and comment too. What is our nearest county that is still protected? Does anybody know? Okay, so something to look forward to. And then also,
Brown's not. I don't know.
we don't know.
I don't know.
Just wondering, because if that has to do with retention and retaining, if we're pulling in more staff or if we want to use these words like better educated, retaining them better because we are still protected, or also the factor that we pay, an average of more than $10 an hour, more than average, is that correct? About an average of $10 more an hour?
Well, the one I included in the packet was,
Yeah.
was the midpoint based off that. If you look at the starting wages, I think the starting wages around 27 something.
Okay.
So.
All right, thank you.
And just clarification, how many counties have already done this? Did somebody say
60 to
60?
62.
Okay. Because I thought I had heard that there were very few, and that's why you were having all this jumping around, but it doesn't sound like that.
No. Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll have this more discussion next month. And feel free to ask questions during the month. Ken, Grant, Kelly, as you think of things. You're welcome to come to, of course, the admin meeting if you're able to. Oral committee reports. None. Review committee minutes. None. Vouchers, claims, and bills. Announcements, we have a couple. First of all, the next regular county board meeting will be September 27th at 9 a.m. because of the WCA annual conference, which is earlier in the week. So again, the 27th at 9. The annual conference itself again is September 23rd through the 25th in La Crosse. For those of you that are attending, we normally make a fashion statement every year. We wear the same shirts on the primary day. This year, the shirts will be available. We need to make our selection very quickly. The selection is yes, you're going to buy one, or no, you're not. It's not a requirement, of course. But this year, we're going to be very fashion forward. We're going to go with the steel gray shirt. So.
Better than the pumpkin.
We need to let
So in other
Jill
words,
know as
gray
soon as
for me.
possible, like today, if you want a shirt or not.
Can I make one other announcement?
You'll blend in with the rest of the.
Just one other announcement. Just like we did last year, we do an employee appreciation picnic. So we're planning to do the Government Center on the 14th and then the Justice Center on the 21st. So you could mark your calendars if you could make one of those and talk with the employees. Just want to let you know.
The per diem
Excuse
code.
me, 14th and 21st of what?
Of September. Sorry. Before the snow flies.
Okay.
There's August, Steve, isn't it?
The meeting per diem code is 828. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If there's no further business to be transacted, I'd like to make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.